You didn't come here to learn how to impress women. You came here to remember who you are and, more importantly, what you should never tolerate again. Because the truth is, most men were never taught where their line is. They confuse endurance with virtue, thinking that if they're patient enough, kind enough, forgiving enough, they'll finally be worthy of love. But that's not virtue, that's slow self-betrayal dressed as loyalty. And the world doesn't reward self-betrayal. It punishes it with silence, confusion, and being forgotten. And you're here to draw the line, not out of pride, not out of anger, but out of calm, grounded self-respect. Because a man who tolerates everything eventually becomes invisible to the wrong women, and more tragically, to himself. And once you become invisible to yourself, you stop leading, you start begging, you bend until you break. So if this message spoke to something inside you, don't just nod and scroll. Lock it in, comment below, speak it out loud, because the more we normalize boundaries, the fewer men suffer quietly. Like this video if it hit where it needed to. Share it with a man who's still mistaking his silence for strength. And remember, you don't rise by being easy to love. You rise by being impossible to manipulate. I'll see you in the next one, but show up as the man who no longer apologizes for having a line. Number 1. When patience becomes a cage. The hidden cost of tolerating too much. What happens when the fire in your chest dims? Not because life defeated you, but because you kept letting things slide. You didn't speak up when she mocked your ambition. You stayed quiet when she made that harmless joke about your height. You told yourself it's not worth the drama, but deep inside, something shifted. Your self-respect quietly took a step back. And the truth is, you didn't lose her respect in a moment. You trained her to forget it. This is where it all begins. Not with an explosion, but with a whisper of self-betrayal. Society loves to praise patience in men. Be understanding, let it go. Don't be too sensitive, and sure, there's power in calm, but unchecked patience that becomes a cage, a silent permission slip for disrespect. The Stoics taught us to master our emotions, not to suppress our standards. Even Machiavelli warned, patience is a virtue, but too much patience is self-betrayal. Imagine your dignity as a throne. Each time you tolerate disrespect, you leave it unguarded. You become a king who welcomes invaders and calls it peace. What today's content reveals is this: if you don't protect your power, someone else will occupy it. This isn't about becoming reactive. It's about becoming sovereign, a man who leads with calm clarity and sets the emotional tone of every interaction. Women don't test you to hurt you. They test you to locate your center, and if your center is absent, they respond with chaos, not because they're cruel, but because energy seeks boundaries the way rivers seek banks. Philosophers like Plato spoke of the necessity of self-governance in his Republic. He who is unable to govern himself cannot govern others. That principle applies not only to empires, but to relationships. You cannot lead love if you cannot guard your self-worth. Jung, too, knew this inner battle well. He believed that when we betray our inner truth, the shadow grows stronger. It manifests in passive resentment, anxiety, or overcompensating through validation seeking. That's why so many men feel drained in relationships, not because love is hard, but because they've stopped leading from strength. So let's be honest, what is tolerated in silence will grow louder in pain. This content is your wake-up call, not to fight women, but to stop abandoning yourself. The 8 behaviors you'll explore are not random. They're patterns, socially accepted microaggressions that quietly erode your confidence. From jokes masked as playfulness to emotional manipulation dressed in guilt. Each one is a subtle test of whether you remember who you are. This is not about being controlling. It's about embodying sovereignty, the type that makes a woman pause before she speaks, not out of fear, but because your presence commands thoughtfulness. You lead not with dominance, but with depth. You teach people how to treat you not through lectures, but through how unshakably you honor your own standards. From the Stoic teachings of Marcus Aurelius to the tactical insights of Machiavelli, the message is clear. Power is not taken. It is surrendered through hesitation. So here's the promise. If you begin to set quiet, Firm boundaries without anger. Without performance, you don't just protect your power. You become magnetic to anyone who values real strength, and those who don't, they naturally exit your life, making room for what aligns. Now ask yourself, are you protecting your peace or just avoiding confrontation? Number 2, the smile that cuts. How jokes undermine respect. She leans across the table and laughs. You're shorter than I expected. It's a joke, so you're supposed to laugh, right? But beneath the surface, something sharp just cut through your presence. It wasn't about height, it was about testing your boundaries, and in that moment, how you respond determines everything, not just how she sees you, but how you see yourself. These subtle digs wrapped in humor aren't innocent. They are probes, a way to assess the strength of your self-respect. And the moment you laugh along just to keep it light, you teach her one dangerous lesson. Your dignity is negotiable. Machiavelli understood this dynamic clearly. In The Prince, he wrote, "Injuries must be inflicted at once, not in the form of revenge, but with clarity. When a woman makes a disrespectful joke, you are being challenged to either reclaim the frame or surrender it." A man rooted in stoic clarity doesn't explode. He doesn't lecture. He simply looks at her and says, "I don't joke about respect." Then he moves on. No drama, no negotiation, just presence. Because here's what most men don't realize. You don't have to raise your voice to assert your value. You just have to raise your standard. From a psychological standpoint, these moments activate a deep part of a woman's subconscious. Carl Jung referred to it as the anima's search for containment, her desire to feel emotional gravity. When she makes a joke at your expense, it's often not cruelty. It's a test to locate your spine. If you pass it, she feels safe. If you fold, she feels superior, and attraction quietly dies. Let's look deeper. The modern man has been trained to be agreeable, to prove he's not like the others. But in doing so, he's become afraid of tension, afraid of saying, "No, that doesn't work for me." But Stoicism teaches the opposite. Seneca said, "See things as they are, and disrespect, however small, is still disrespect." You are not here to be a comedian. You are here to be a man of calm precision, a man who sees through playful insults and recognizes them for what they are. Boundary tests. Here's how it plays out. She makes the comment. You pause. Let the silence carry weight. You say, "I don't joke about respect." Then you change the subject gracefully but firmly. That's it. You don't need to convince her. You don't need to scold her. What you're doing is resetting the dynamic. You're showing her that your self-worth isn't something she can casually toss around for entertainment. And that subtle shift, that's where attraction starts to rebuild, and not through charm, but through clarity. From Plato's lens in Phaedo. The pursuit of truth requires that we strip away illusion. The illusion here is that humor always equals safety. But men who know their worth don't hide behind laughter when their identity is being poked. They respond with poise, with strength, with self-command. Reed would call this psychological sovereignty, when your emotional tone leads the dynamic. When you refuse to be pulled into defensiveness or performance, you become the gravity in the room. Your daily affirmation here is, "I command respect." Say it before every meeting, every date, every conflict, and more importantly, live it in every interaction. So the next time she jokes about something you wouldn't tolerate from a stranger, remember, if you tolerate it now, you teach her how to treat you later. And attraction is not built through agreement. It's built through boundaries. Number 3, when guilt is a trap. How emotional manipulation disguises itself as sensitivity. She cancels on you at the last minute for the 3rd time. You pause, slightly frustrated. But instead of addressing it, you hear, "You're just too sensitive." Now the issue isn't her behavior, it's your reaction. She's flipped the script. And without realizing it, you've been pulled into defending your feelings instead of confronting her actions. This is the art of emotional manipulation through guilt. And it works not because she's cruel, but because you've been trained to question yourself whenever discomfort arises. Society tells men, be tolerant, be flexible, don't be controlling. But Machiavelli saw the danger in this. He warned, recognize the noose before the rope. That rope, in modern relationships, often arrives in the form of guilt-coated gaslighting. And if you don't see it for what it is, you'll spend your life apologizing for having standards. Let's look at the dynamic. When a woman uses guilt to dismiss your boundaries, she's not resolving the issue, she's redirecting the spotlight. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about how she let you down. It's about how you're too emotional, too needy, or not understanding. You become the problem, and she becomes the victim of your expectations. A Stoic man doesn't fall into that trap. He doesn't argue his emotions. He names his boundary, then steps back. The proper response calmly. I don't feel bad for respecting my time. Say it, then stop. Let silence take the stage. This phrase is not an argument. It's a line in the sand, a Machiavellian line, one that says, I am not emotionally available for guilt that masks irresponsibility. Jung spoke often of emotional projection. When someone refuses to own their behavior, they unconsciously project their shame onto you, and if you're not grounded in self-awareness, you'll absorb it. That's why Stoic grounding is vital. Epictetus said it best. It's not events that disturb us, but our interpretations of them. When you interpret guilt as truth, you surrender your power. But when you see it for what it is, a tool of deflection, you reclaim your position. Here's how this plays out in real life. She flakes again. Instead of apologizing, she says, you're taking this too personally. You pause, breathe. You say, I don't feel bad for respecting my time. Then you detach. No need for escalation. You simply shift your energy back to your mission. Your detachment will sting more than any argument. Why? Because you are no longer negotiating your dignity. This is where Stoicism shines, not by making you cold, but by making you untouchable in your center. When you stop chasing emotional justice and instead anchor yourself in clarity, you stop being reactive. You start becoming a man who can't be manipulated by mood swings. Reid's concept of the masculine frame mirrors this exactly. Women will mirror your self-regard. If you fold under guilt, she will see you as malleable. But if you stay firm, kind, but immovable, she will feel safe and challenged in your presence. And that's where real attraction lies. Plato, in The Republic, wrote about justice as a harmony within the soul. That harmony is broken when a man defends his standards like sins. You don't need to explain your boundaries, you only need to hold them. So the next time someone tries to make you feel guilty for expecting respect, remember this: it's not your job to be less of a man to make someone more comfortable. Your affirmation, I hold my frame, and every time you say it, you remind yourself, your time, your energy, and your values are not up for emotional negotiation. Number 4, the silent leash. How her silence becomes a game of control. You've had a disagreement. Nothing explosive, just a difference in perspective. Hours pass. Then a day. She doesn't text. She doesn't call. Her silence stretches out not to heal, but to hook. You start wondering, did I say too much? Did I push too hard? Should I reach out first? That's exactly the trap. This isn't silence for reflection, it's silence for control. And unless you see it clearly, you'll walk straight into the leash she just wrapped around your self-worth. Machiavelli warned us with a timeless metaphor. A prince must know how to frighten wolves, but also how to recognize traps in modern relationships. Strategic silence is both the wolf and the trap. It's not about healing, it's about provoking neediness. The moment you chase, you've already lost the frame. Let's be clear, silence can be noble when used to reset. But when it's weaponized, it becomes emotional blackmail. The Stoic man doesn't react to that manipulation. He recognizes the play, and instead of chasing, he leans back. His response is quiet, precise, and powerful. Let me know when you're ready to talk. One text, that's it. Then he returns to his mission, his gym session, his work, his purpose. Because that's where power lives, not in pursuit, but in presence. Jung understood the unconscious games we play. He believed that people often withhold as a way to reclaim control when they feel vulnerable. But here's the insight. When you chase a woman who's gone cold to control you, you reinforce her belief that you need her validation to feel steady. From a Stoic perspective, this is the moment to practice detachment, not indifference, but disciplined non-reactivity. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Her silence, that's an external event. Your reaction, that's your kingdom. Let's explore how this looks in action. She goes silent after an emotional disagreement. You feel the pull to fix things. You want to call, to explain. But instead, you text once. Let me know when you're ready to talk. Then you disappear into your schedule, into your values, into your higher self. This does two things. It breaks the pattern of her controlling the rhythm of connection. It reinforces your emotional independence. That independence is what women subconsciously crave. Not a man who disappears in anger, but one who remains unmoved in clarity. From Reed's Psychology of Masculine Polarity, this is the frame that flips the dynamic. She is no longer the emotional leader you are, and not through force, but through calm retreat. Society often teaches men to fix things fast, to apologize even when confused, to reach out even when wronged. But that energy makes you chase disrespect, and what is chased rarely respects the one pursuing. Plato, in Gorgias, explored reason as the highest form of control. When you detach from reactive behavior, you allow your reason, not your emotion, to guide the outcome. And nothing is more attractive to a woman than a man who doesn't beg for her voice, but commands her attention through absence. Affirm this daily. I don't chase silence, I master my peace. Because when your silence feels like still water, calm but deep, she will come to drink. And if she doesn't, that tells you everything you need to know. Number 5. Innocent on the surface, dangerous at the core. How subtle disrespect tests your standards. She shows up 30 minutes late without a word. She interrupts you mid-sentence. She flakes on plans, only to say, "I forgot, things got busy." None of it is dramatic, none of it feels aggressive. But if you brush it off and smile, telling yourself to be understanding, you've missed the quiet test she just gave you. These aren't accidents. These are calculated micro-tests, a woman's subconscious way of asking, does this man value himself enough to hold the line? Machiavelli would call this the slow erosion of power, not through one blow, but through 1,000 small concessions. His advice: it is much safer to be feared than loved, when one of the two must be lacking. Translated to modern relationships, it means respect must come first. Love without boundaries becomes manipulation. This is where the Stoic man separates himself. He doesn't scold, he doesn't guilt, he simply notes the pattern, sets a standard, and withdraws when it's crossed. Here's the magic phrase, noted, delivered with calm, unwavering tone. Noted says everything. It doesn't beg, it doesn't escalate, but it tells her, I see it, I remember it, and I value my time too much to repeat this. And if the pattern repeats, you withdraw your energy. You cancel the next plan. You don't give warnings, you give distance. And that distance teaches her more than any words ever could. Jung wrote about the shadow as the part of ourselves that seeks control when we feel out of alignment. When a woman disrespects you subtly, she may not even be aware she's doing it. But your silence and continued availability send a message. I'm a man who tolerates being overlooked. Stoicism gives you the antidote, Seneca said. Set your course by the stars, not by the lights of every passing ship. You don't react to every flake, interruption, or lateness. You track patterns, you set internal standards, and you act without drama, but with finality. Reed's polarity model explains this as scarcity value. When a man becomes slightly unavailable, not out of ego, but out of disciplined standards, a woman begins to calibrate to his worth. She knows she has to meet his energy with equal respect. And if she doesn't, he'll be gone, not emotionally dramatic, but emotionally unavailable to disrespect. Here's what application looks like. She arrives late, you don't lecture, you say, noted. With a slight nod, she flakes again. You cancel the next plan. No explanation needed. You go to the gym, to your craft, to your solitude. And what happens? She feels it. She senses the shift. And if she respects you, she'll adjust. If she doesn't, then your absence was the best boundary you ever set. Your daily affirmation, my time is sacred. Plato wrote in Laws that the just man is one who lives aligned with what he values, not with what others allow. Your ability to withdraw from repeated small disrespect is not punishment, it's preservation. Men who let small slights slide think they're choosing peace, but in truth, they're choosing slow erosion, and by the time the big disrespect comes, their voice will already be gone. So next time you feel that twinge of, should I say something, don't argue, don't scold, just say, noted. Then let your absence speak for you. Number 6, the emotional roller coaster, when her highs are a mask for control. One moment, she's clinging to you with warmth, laughter, and tender words. The next, she's cold, distant, uninterested, and the pattern repeats: affection when you comply, withdrawal when you assert yourself. You start to feel like you're being trained, not loved, trained to obey in exchange for affection. Welcome to the emotional roller coaster, a manipulation tactic where love becomes a reward and distance becomes a punishment. And if you don't recognize the pattern early, you'll begin to self-edit, shrink, and compromise just to keep the good moments coming. Machiavelli said it with brutal clarity. Injuries must be inflicted at once, benefits conferred gradually. But modern manipulators flip the formula. They give you bursts of pleasure so you won't notice the injury when it arrives. This tactic isn't always conscious. Sometimes even she doesn't realize what she's doing, but that doesn't matter. What matters is how you respond. Because if you let your emotions get addicted to her attention, you've handed her the remote control to your dignity. The Stoic man doesn't react to emotional bait. He observes patterns, he steps back, and then he speaks a simple, calibrated truth. I value consistency. No begging, no confrontation, just a mirror held up to her behavior. And if she wants to keep your presence, she'll need to match that standard or she'll feel your absence. Let's make this practical. Start journaling your emotional fluctuations in the relationship. Ask yourself, when is she warm? When is she cold? What triggered the shift? If you find affection tied to obedience, it's not love, it's training. Respond calmly. I value consistency. Then maintain your standard without explaining further. This resets the power dynamic. She realizes you're not addicted to emotional highs. You're grounded. You're not chasing affection, you're watching patterns. Carl Jung would call this the unveiling of the anima's projection. Inconsistency often reveals a woman's inner chaos. If you meet her chaos with your own insecurity, the polarity collapses. But if you meet it with clarity and self-governance, you become the lighthouse, the constant in her storm. From the Stoic point of view, this is discernment in action. Epictetus taught us, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. And when you hold your standard without trying to convince her, you stop being one of many, you become the man she can't unfeel. Reed's model of emotional gravity emphasizes this perfectly. It's not dominance that attracts, it's emotional steadiness. When a man can sit still in the face of someone else's drama, he becomes both safe and stimulating. He evokes desire not through performance, but through calm resistance. So when the warmth fades after you set a boundary, don't chase the sun. Let the night fall. Let her realize that her temperature doesn't set your internal climate. Your affirmation, I see patterns, not moments. Because attraction built on moments dies with the mood. But attraction built on consistency lives in the soul. Plato reminds us in Phaedo, truth is born in calmness, not in excitement. And when your truth becomes steady enough to spot the storm behind the sunshine, you become the one thing manipulation cannot handle. A man who doesn't flinch when affection is used as a weapon. Now, speak out and comment below. I value consistency more than emotional highs. Number 7, the reality bender. How gaslighting destroys your trust in yourself. You express concern. You ask her why she's still texting her ex. Her response: "You're overthinking." Suddenly, you're not addressing her behavior, you're defending your sanity. This is gaslighting at its most refined, not through rage, not through shouting, but through a soft twist of reality that makes you question your intuition. And once you stop trusting yourself, she never has to change because you'll spend all your energy doubting your own perception. This is where men lose themselves, not because they're weak, but because they're compassionate. They want to be fair, open-minded, mature. But Machiavelli warned us long ago, the vulgar crowd is always taken by appearances, and gaslighting thrives on appearance. It wraps deception in reasonableness and coats lies in emotional maturity. The Stoic man sees through it. He doesn't get pulled into the circus of self-doubt. He names the game and steps off the stage. When gaslit, he responds not with rage or endless explanation, but with 5 words that close the loop. I don't debate my intuition. That's it. You don't need to justify your instincts. You don't need her permission to believe what you feel. Jung would call this anchoring the self in the face of projection. If you give away your inner compass, you give away everything. From a Stoic lens, this is the essence of self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius said, "Look things in the face and know them for what they are." When something feels off, your job is not to seek approval. Your job is to sit with it, observe it, and honor what your body and mind are telling you. Gaslighting works because it chips away at your foundation. First, it makes you doubt your instincts. Then, it makes you crave reassurance. Eventually, you rely on her version of reality instead of your own. But when you say, "I don't debate my intuition," and calmly set your boundary, e.g., texting your ex crosses a line for me, you take your power back. You don't wait for her to agree. You simply enforce the standard and live by it. This is how you become untouchable. Reed would call this psychological sovereignty, when your internal reality becomes the source of your decisions, not the emotional weather of your partner. And that's what women, deep down, respect most. A man who doesn't flinch when accused. A man who doesn't need to explain what he feels. A man who knows that self-trust is non-negotiable. So how do you apply this? The next time you sense something's off, write it down, document the pattern. Confront calmly, don't argue, don't accuse. If she deflects or mocks your concern, say, "I don't debate my intuition." Set your boundary clearly, then step back and observe not her behavior, but your own peace. Plato, in Phaedrus, speaks of the soul's ability to know truth not through words, but through alignment. If something disrupts your alignment, your job is not to suppress it. Your job is to stand still in it. Your affirmation, "My reality holds." Because if your world becomes defined by someone else's version of truth, you're no longer a man, you're an echo. Gaslighting doesn't require you to lose your mind. It just needs you to doubt it. Break the pattern, trust yourself again. Number 8, shamed into softness. How masculinity gets reframed as a problem. You make a decision, you take the lead, you say, "Let's meet at 7. She pauses and fires back. "Why are you so controlling?" It doesn't matter that you were calm. It doesn't matter that she asked. What's the plan 5 minutes earlier? Somehow, your decisiveness has now become a flaw. And if you're not grounded in who you are, you'll begin to do what so many men silently do. You'll soften your edge, just to be liked. This is how masculinity gets shamed. Not with obvious attacks, but with subtle reframes that turn your leadership into aggression, your confidence into arrogance, and your purpose into selfishness. Machiavelli warned us, learn how not to be good, not in the sense of becoming cruel, but in recognizing that virtues taken out of context become weaknesses. Assertiveness, when questioned enough times, begins to look like a threat to the uncentered, to the manipulative, to the insecure. But the Stoic man does not bend his nature to please fragile egos. He responds with steady clarity. I lead because it's my nature, not apologetically, not defensively, just fact. This simple phrase becomes your boundary. It says, you may not understand my energy, but I will not abandon it to be more palatable. Because once you give up your masculine leadership for acceptance, what remains is a shell, a polite, agreeable, indecisive man who doesn't stir attraction, but simply occupies space. Jung would call this the loss of the animus, the strong masculine principle that holds order and direction. And when a man loses that fire to shame or guilt, he begins to betray his own archetype. He becomes a passenger in a car he was meant to drive. Let's be clear, true masculinity isn't domineering. It doesn't need to overpower, but it must lead. And leadership, in today's culture, has become dangerously redefined. The modern lie is this: if you were a real man, you wouldn't need control. But the truth is, control isn't about others, it's about self-mastery. Stoicism defines this best. Seneca said, "Be true to yourself, and you will never be false to others." When your internal compass is strong, you don't lead to dominate, you lead, because clarity is your nature. Here's how to apply this in the real world. The next time she shames your directness or leadership, pause, breathe. With calm eye contact, say, "I lead because it's my nature." Then change nothing. Let your actions reinforce your frame. Do not explain it, do not shrink it, do not laugh it off. Your calm confidence will trigger two things: respect, from those who recognize authentic strength; resistance, from those who wanted you soft and manageable. And both responses are fine, because your goal is not approval, your goal is sovereignty. Reed's polarity model supports this truth. Women are drawn not to perfect men, but to men who are unapologetically themselves, even in the face of misunderstanding. Plato, in the Republic, described the just man as one who governs his own soul. When you know who you are and you lead from that center, you no longer fall into shame traps. You simply walk your path, with your spine straight and your energy intact. Your affirmation: my masculinity is my strength. Not to prove anything, not to flex, but to honor the energy that built civilizations, protected homes, and still anchors relationships today. If she cannot respect your leadership, she does not respect your essence. Now, speak out and comment below. I lead because it's my nature, not because I need control. One final note for the few who are truly ready to shift everything. If you're done playing the same game as the 99%, if you're ready to detach from the noise and start moving differently, not just in how women see you, but how you see you, then stay close. What I'm building right now will change the way you carry yourself. Speak, move, and attract. And it's coming soon. If this message stirred something in you, don't just let it sit in your mind. Anchor it. Write a comment, even one sentence. It helps you remember, and it might awaken something in someone else too. Like this video if it resonated. Share it with someone who's still figuring it out, who just needs a nudge to start walking the deeper path. Trust your instinct. You found this for a reason. We're all trying to see clearer, stand firmer, live sharper. So let's keep building minds that don't break and presence that speaks without a word. We're just getting started. Stay tuned.